What's up everyone, welcome back to Stag Voiceover. My name is Neil Glasgow. In today's video I wanted to give you some hints and tips about improving your audio quality. Now stick with me till the end because I'm going to give you a time-saving tip that I promise you will save you so much time in editing you'll wonder why and how you ever live without it. So with that in mind, let's get into it. So tip number one really in getting really good audio is obviously the space that you record in. I've talked about this before, but just to labour that point, make sure you're recording in the quietest space that you possibly can. Make sure that you eliminate any internal noise that's in there. If you have a laptop in the room that has a fan going, there are programs that I've talked about before that can minimise that, but your best bet, if you can, is to have your laptop or computer outside of your recording space and maybe have another monitor that's fed into that space so that at least you can see what you're doing. Having that sound out of your booth, I promise you, having that sound outside of your booth will get you a better response from any audio engineers that listen to you or work with you, creative directors, studio managers. These people will really respect that your sound is crystal clear. It means that they have to do significantly less on their end to edit out, essentially, any of those blemishes on your recording. Tip number two, when you record, you want your gains to be between -18 and -12 dB. Now, what I mean by this, if you're not familiar, is when you look on your DAW when you speak, you'll see your peaks going up of what's going into the recording. Now, the reason that you want this to be between -18 and -12 is that gives you enough of a sound that gets picked up in the recording. That should pick up everything within your vocal range, but it gives you enough of a ceiling for your editing and your mastering. And if you need to get a little bit louder, you're not going to be peaking at -1 or 0 dB or even higher. Anything above 0 dB is significantly loud. It's really going to have a negative effect on your audio, and what you might find is actually your clipping. Now, when you clip, if you're not familiar with that term, it means that you've gone above the setting. And I'll give you an example of it now, and you'll hear the distortion in the sound. Now, this is going to be loud, so if you listen to this on headphones, turn it down just a little bit. When I talk really loud, this goes over my clipping ratio. So when I render this, it's going to sound too loud. Right, bring that down. Apologise for that. But having that headroom on your recording space is really important to allow you to have that sound and, as I say, to be able to play about with it a little bit. Tip number 3 is when you edit, when you have done everything that you need to do and you're ready to master your sound. Mastering, essentially, just finalise it so that you're ready to send it off. One thing that you really need to make sure you do is you normalise your audio. And you want to normalise between -6 and -3 dB, maximum -3 dB. This means that it will make everything louder on your recording, make everything clearer on your recording, but by and large, that's the level that a lot of people will be listening to you at. So if you actually rendered your sound at -12, -18, it means they're going to have to turn up the volume, and they might have already had it a bit loud or a bit quiet from the last one, so that if you can have consistency, it will demonstrate to the people that you're sending it to that you know what you're doing. So record between -18 and -12, normalise between -6 and -3. Really important there. Tip number 4 is if you use compression. And I say if because if you don't know what you're doing with it yet, learn, don't just mess about with it. But I suppose what I should do is give you a feeling for what compression actually is. Compression is when you take your audio, it compresses it. Making myself dark there. When I say compress, it's taking the louder bits and bringing them to a more normal volume, and it takes the lower bits and brings them up to a more normal volume. And essentially, it gives you consistency in your sound. So it makes the louder bits quieter, the quieter bits a bit louder. Now, when you're using your compression filter, what you want to do is you don't want it to be a 1-to-1 ratio, because you're not going to hear any difference. Now, I'm not going to show you a video of what this is, because I know how to do it on my Reaper system. If you're using Audacity or Adobe Audition, I don't know what the settings are, so I don't want to give you any false information. But as a good rule of thumb, when you're doing your compression, you want it between a 2-to-1 ratio and a 4-to-1 ratio. And personally, I use a 2-to-1 ratio, and I tend to bring my compression filter, my compression threshold rather, to about negative 24 to 27 dB. That means that when my peaks hit that ratio, it starts to lower things down, and it'll lower it to about negative 6 to negative 8 dB, so that when I amplify my wet recording, you have a dry and a wet recording. Dry is unedited, wet is edited. When I amplify my wet recording, that should even me out and bring me back to my really between negative 6 and negative 3 dB that I'm normalizing in. So that's a little tip for compression and how to use it. I might do a more in-depth version of compression using Reaper, but the reality is the guy Kenny Njoyu who put Reaper together has some really comprehensive videos on this, and I would in essence be showing you what I do, but I do what his videos have taught me to do as well. So if you do use Reaper, use the videos that are provided on the platform to train yourself how to use that. My next tip is having some room tone within your recording. So one of the things that you're going to find when you edit is you might be editing out some clicks, some breaths, and it leaves some space. And what you don't want is to have dead space on your recording. And you might be thinking, well, what does it matter? As long as there's no sound there, they're just hearing my finished audio. And you're right to an extent. The sound is absolutely dead, but it's not digitally dead. And what I mean by that is when you render and say a WAV file, and that goes off to an audio engineer to do their bit, even when it's completely dead to your ears, there will be a digital signal. If you've edited it that there's nothing there at all, it's completely flat. And audio engineers really aren't a fan of this, because it will affect the overall sound when they eventually come to edit and master it. So what I recommend you do, and what I do, is I actually have two files available every time I open up my recording. I have my primary recording that I actually do all my recording, and then once I've edited out all the bits that I don't want, I have a second recording that has some pre-saved room tone. And room tone is just what's in the room. Take 10 seconds of complete silence in the space that you record, save it, and make it just the default that you go to when you record. So when you've edited everything out, elongate your room tone for the entire mix that you've done, for the entire recording that you've done, and merge them together. That means that it is no longer digitally dead. Once you've done that, that's when you're going to want to normalize to -3, -6, and that will give you a consistent level throughout the whole recording. Once you've done that, you're then free to render in whatever file format that you need to render. And the last tip I'm going to give you is, I promise you, a lifesaver when it comes to editing your audio. And you've probably seen me in a few videos. I've got this thing. It's a dog clicker. And that's what it does. When I make a mistake, what some people do is they'll click, they'll do whatever it is to mark the audio. Now, I find doing clicks and everything quite distracting. It doesn't help my particular workflow. But This was a tip that I picked up from Booth Junkies, which is another YouTube channel. Go check them out. Really, really good. Mike Delgadio. He's got a really great voice. If you're looking for home booth setup tips and some microphone reviews and stuff, I'd recommend going and checking him out. But he turned me on to the dog clicker. And what the dog clicker does is when you make a mistake, it gives a very definitive waveform pattern in your recording. And it's very easy to go through and see. So when you're going through and editing, you can see mistake there, mistake there, mistake there, and quickly edit that out. Having the dog clicker, and not exaggerating, has saved me hours of work, especially if you're doing long form narration. Having that to be able to go back and refer to, instead of listening out from the mistakes and hoping that you catch them all, you can visually see where all your mistakes are. And it makes it really simple. If you do miss one, you can just go back to your file and edit that out. The clients really like it. They know that you've made a mistake, especially when they're going to be doing all the editing. You just let them know whenever they hear that sound, that's where the mistake's going to be. I hope you found this video helpful and that the videos in my series are really helping you become a better voiceover artist and get into the voiceover industry in 2020 and 2021. If they are, then please drop me a like and subscribe. A comment in the section below is always appreciated. Remember, you can absolutely be a voiceover artist. I'll catch you in the next video.